Welcome to Brandon Hall Group's Excellence at Work podcast. You will hear from industry leaders covering innovative, cutting-edge business, learning, and HR topics that weave current market research and technology into each episode. Our Excellence at Work podcast is hosted by Brandon Hall Group's Chief Operating Officer and Principal HCM Analyst, Rachel Cook.
Hi, and welcome to Brandon Hall Group's Excellence at Work podcast. Thank you for joining us today. And thank you, Isabel Wallace from Thinking Cap, as joining us today in our conversation about gamification. Hi, Isabel. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Great. It's great to have you with me today. And I'm excited about our topic around gamification and kind of sharing with our audience and our community about some of the best practices and tips that you want to talk about as it relates to gamification, and especially implementing gamification within your LMS. This is a follow-up to a recent webinar that you had presented with our team on gamification. And I'll also share a little bit about your background and company for those of you that are listening in and may not be aware or would like to learn more about Isabel. She has been with Thinking Cap since its inception in 2001 as general manager and one of the principals. Specializing in the process and user experience, Isabel works with customers to onboard their training programs into their LMS. Her valuable insights in delivering unique and engaging training programs for associations like NCPA, corporations like Amazon, and nonprofit organizations like the British Council. Isabel also speaks about how to achieve 100% completion rates in your training. So it's all about really kind of optimizing your training, and it sounds like that's your core competencies or your passion where it lays. And so, again, I'm excited to have you here with me today. I know you had a great webinar recently, and you had some questions during that webinar that we're going to further kind of dive into. So, Isabel, if you can share with us, gamification in today's environment. What are you seeing are some of the benefits, and how do learning professionals implement it, especially within their LMS?
So I think different organizations are implementing it differently, depending on what their objectives are. So we have a lot of the time we're working with clients that are trying to achieve 100% completion, for example, in a compliance program. So everyone's got to take that preventing workplace harassment course. It's not usually a fun subject. It's a necessary subject, and it's how do we make that interesting, and how do we get people to come back in and take that along with, the other necessary courses they have to take. So a lot of the time there are specific objectives that they're trying to achieve, and they're using gamification as a way to augment their solutions to make it more possible. So we've done a number of different projects with clients where we try to encourage completion, higher completion rates, also interest in the content, and also retention in the content. So everything you could imagine that you need to do with your training program, whatever the objectives are, there's generally a way with gamification to help make that a little bit easier to achieve.
And what we're seeing in our research, and especially having, offering that personalized training or that blended approach, and having different delivery methods to help engage, and not just engage, but to help your learners retain the information, right, and to have greater impact. And gamification is increasingly showing the ROI and being able to do so, and helping with that learning retention, not just the engagement piece, because yes, it can be more fun, right? And I think often when learning becomes where the experience becomes more impactful, and you're able to link learning, and people can they not only they're learning, but they're also being able to apply it and help them do their jobs better, and then they want to come back and learn more about it. Can you give some examples from some of the clients that you're working with of how, what are some of the tips, for the benefits of gamification?
Certainly. So I would say most of my clients that do really well are ones where they take whatever the theme is of what their program is discussing, and they expand that beyond just the courses that they're looking at. So things like, for example, your audience is customer service operators, and you're trying to get them to learn as much as possible about all the services that they're supporting. You want them to take as many courses as possible, but you want them to be able to retain the knowledge that they have. But most of it is trying to get them to come in and want to come in and learn more because they'll get more information that way. With a lot of those programs, they'll take whatever that subject matter is, and they'll take the theme of that throughout everything from the name of the sorts of points they might reward people with once they've completed, or some fun badges that incorporate different aspects of the topics that they were just learning about. Whatever the subject is, just expanding it outside of that area really helps with building that retention. But it also encourages some curiosity as well, because seeing that badge in someone else's profile might encourage them to want to learn about that thing. How did they get that badge? What did they learn that from? And then take the course and then build the retention that way. But it's also how you build on from that once the activity has been completed. So whatever the course is that they're taking, and there's one tidbit of information in there that they need to learn, build that into a little fun little survey or activity afterwards that they can do anytime within the LMS is an ideal situation.
That helps you continue to build upon what they're learning, and to, so that the learning doesn't stop, that it's more embedded into their daily activities. And also, the shorter pieces of learning, right? The chunk size bits of learning, gamification allows you to do so, right? Because you can have it broken into like little bits and pieces, rather than having someone spend, a whole day or a week or however long that they may need to. Not that you can't do that, but if you have it developed in a way that it continues to build upon, then the learning never stops, right?
Exactly. I do love programs where they focus more on micro learning, because yes, it's one piece, it's one knowledge, and then ideally as fast as possible that they can apply it. I think their chances of retention are better. And I think there are a lot of opportunities in gamification to allow you to apply that quite quickly, but also just reinforce as well, just complete opportunity to reinforce whatever that behavior is or whatever that knowledge is.
And so what are some of the things that a learning professional needs to think about for implementation?
So I would always start with what is the, just like you do with your courses, what's the learning objective, right? If the learning objective is, I don't really care if they learn this, but I need to get 100% complete. I mean, to be honest, I do get some clients that come with that, but generally you want them to learn whatever it is in that course as well. So, it's really looking at what your objectives are. Is it, I need them to get as much knowledge as possible, or I need them to come in and self-identify areas of improvement and be able to build from that, or it's to build and encourage an audience that helps each other as well. So there's a lot of team building options around gamification. So really the first thing I would look at is what is the objective of your program? And instead of just saying badges sound great, let's do badges. Badges may not be necessarily the right solution. It's about looking at what the real objective is, and then piece together the program around that, and look at what the different tools within gamification will actually support that objective.
And there's a lot of options with gamification. There's, the options are now kind of endless. There's so many different ways to deliver it: simulations, quizzes, just if you can think about what we do, in our personal gaming, or what, kids do with the different variety of games that they have, this is now available in the workplace. Do you see, are there certain trends that you see that some types of games or some types of approaches are better than others, or that have a greater impact than others, or are, liked better than others?
I do see a lot of people taking advantage of competitive audiences a lot more than other audiences, but I don't know if that's necessarily more successful or if it's in a way low-hanging fruit, to be honest. we do see a lot of people implementing learning point systems where they're trying to identify who has more of a particular knowledge in certain subject areas, using a point system for that, which is a useful use for it, but you are really only going to capture the ones that come in and take the course because they are competing with someone else who has more points, kind of thing. So I don't know if it's necessarily the best answer, but I think that really it depends on the audience and what your objectives are that would identify how to quantify that success. And I think that there is just more people who are aiming for the competitive audience because that's easier, as opposed to looking at the people who aren't necessarily engaging as much, but could have massive benefits if they were approached appropriately, I think.
So would you say compliance training is a topic that can be converted into gamification?
Yep.
For its entirety, or would it be part of depending on what it is, kind of part of that program?
I think whatever it is you're teaching, anything can be, even if it's the saddest subject in the world, but you still got to teach it, no matter what the seriousness of the content. I think there's still an opportunity because it's how you approach that subject matter anyway. So yeah, so I would definitely say compliance can be a definite area that you can use gamification for, and a great way to maintain your 100% compliance that you need in a lot of these programs where, there's no choice. You have to take this course, and you can't just keep messaging bosses and bosses' bosses and bosses' bosses all the way up the chain until you get to the top. There has to be another reason why someone wants to take that course.
Right. Now, are there any tips, or are there things that you advise against, or things that you've seen that you should be aware of when you're designing these programs?
Yeah, I think games for game's sake isn't always a good spend. If you're just trying to make your course more fun, and throw in something that seems like a game theme, that may not necessarily be worth the money, to be honest. It's almost better to really just focus on having good quality content. But if you can really look at it and analyze it and figuring out the best way to make it an actual game that really will boost potential of retention, then yes, it's worth the spend. But I do see some people where they just try to theme their courses and think that makes it gamification. And I don't know if that's necessarily a good area to spend money on.
Right. And we've seen in our research about 60% of companies find games to be moderately to extremely effective for learning. However, still not enough companies are prioritizing or allocating resources towards gamification. Why do you think, or what can, how can we get more companies on board to really, implement this in their companies?
Well, I can tell you, I pitch it almost every single onboarding project I do now. Not just because it makes the project a bit more fun, but because I know they have an objective, and I'm trying to make sure that what their setup is in the LMS will meet that objective. But I do think you'll find that there are a lot of LMS administrators who are trying to maintain programs or set up programs that don't have the time to do more than just the bare basics of let's get this course in and get it set up and get it out and get it to who needs to be in there, and then make sure they can, honestly, most of them seem to have not enough time to really take a step back and analyze it and sort of change the architecture of the program per se. So I would say that probably if I had a gut guess on why it's not being implemented as much, it's because either they're not aware of their options or they just don't have time to even investigate those options.
Right. It comes to competing priorities, right? And to what's heard or what gets, pushed up the rank further. But I think building that ROI and that you have to have the data to justify it. Yeah. And there's a lot of great examples of companies that are very successful in deploying the gamification, and the results speak for themselves. So I'd recommend that if you are thinking about it, or if you already have it built, that you continue to build that business case. And if you haven't, begun, that you really should incorporate this as part of your blended learning strategy.
Oh, completely. And there's just so many different ways. It could be as simple as what you add to your certificate, at the end of completion. There's so many different, even low budget things that can be done within an LMS that most LMSs should be able to support, that I think it's really just being able to take the time to look at how best to achieve that. And yeah, we've had some clients that had learners messaging them saying, we need more courses to take. And you don't hear that very often. And when I heard that, I made my day, because you really never hear that where a client is looking for more content to consume. So yeah.
I just had an interview yesterday with another company on a similar topic, and they said the same thing. The more that they build, or the more of these simulations or gamification offerings that they have, their audience is asking for more. And you have not heard anyone say that they're not asking for more when you have, when you offer this type of learning approach. So, that's something to consider, because I think that learning professionals are always trying to justify the means or the ROI and get people to take their learning if it's not mandated. So if that's the case, and you're an example of proof, and we're hearing it time and time again from others that are offering these types of learning, that you, as a learning professional, you really need to figure out how to incorporate it. And once you get started, it's not necessarily that hard. You just start simple and then keep building and building. Is there anything else, Isabel, that you would recommend?
I would just really continue whatever the theme is within your subject matter. Make sure that it expands across everything, because I think it helps keep everything in their memory as well. Even just little visual tips and tricks throughout your interface, as much as you can customize the interface. I would recommend it, so that not that I'm saying you should do this for copyright reasons, but if you were, for example, teaching someone to be a wizard, I would make sure the entire interface looked like a Harry Potter experience, just completely take everything about that, whether it's the design of your progress bars or your donut charts, or everything from how you lock courses and then unlock them when they've met the prerequisites. Just fun things like that. Just try to incorporate that, but do it in a themed way that matches your subject matter, if possible. And I think that it's a minor thing, but it really does help make open doors to more things that you can do to incorporate gamification.
And as far as technology, is there anything else that you should consider with having the right technology or the right LMS? Are there considerations that companies should know?
Well, I would definitely look at an LMS ideally that has supportive badges using the open badge standard, because any badge that you give out, you want to make sure that it follows the standard and can be shared, if possible, outside of the LMS as well. I would also make sure that they have a good point system that allows you to break up your points wherever possible, because I don't think one point necessarily is the same as another point. I think the more data you can get out of just which points they have really helps. So say you may have a set of leadership points that you award different skills based on the activities they've done. It's extremely helpful. So I definitely recommend looking for a point system that allows you to break up those points. But yeah, I mean, most of the other things that I would recommend would be around making sure that they have good certificate options and things like that. Yeah, I would recommend items like that, but the typical ones that you see in a lot of LMSs out there. And then ideally one that lets you customize the learner experience as much as possible, because again, the more customized you can get that experience to what you're teaching and following the theme, the better.
Thank you, Isabel. Great advice. Thanks for joining me today. And I hope that all of you listening in or joining us are finding some helpful tips here and considerations for gamification.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Thanks, you too.
Thank you.